Millionaire sees a poor boy dancing barefoot with his disabled daughter. What happens next is unforgettable. The sky was slate gray above the Donovan estate, thick with the kind of silence that seemed to grow heavier inside the vast marble halls. Rain threatened at the edges of the horizon, but inside the mansion, not a single sound dared to breathe. Not since her accident. Not since the day Joy had quietly packed its bags and slipped out the back door. Mr. Donovan stood alone behind the enormous glass wall of his study, a crystal tumbler of untouched bourbon in one hand, the other tucked into his suit pocket. His gaze, sharp and distant, was fixed on the sprawling gardens below, a place once filled with laughter and the echo of little feet. But not anymore. Not since Elise's legs stopped working. And then, movement. He narrowed his eyes. There, at the edge of the property, near the old gazebo long covered in ivy, was Elise's wheelchair. Empty. Panic surged. He rushed to the window, heart hammering. And then he saw her. She wasn't alone. A boy, barefoot. His hair matted, clothes torn and clinging to his small frame. He looked no older than Elise, yet his movements were free and fluid like the wind. He twirled around her, holding her small hands gently, guiding her arms like wings. She laughed, a sound so sudden and clear, Donovan dropped his glass. It shattered on the floor, but he didn't flinch. He stared. Her head was tilted back, eyes shining, mouth wide in delight. It was unmistakable. She was smiling. For the first time in almost 3 years. But the stranger, who was he? Where had he come from? And how? How had he gotten onto the property? Mr. Donovan turned sharply, his steps echoing like gunshots down the hall as he marched toward the garden. His chest burned, not just with anger or confusion, but with something far more dangerous, something he had sealed away long ago. The grass was still wet from the morning dew as Mr. Donovan stepped outside, but he didn't notice. His Italian leather shoes soaked quickly as he strode across the manicured lawn, eyes locked on the boy who dared touch his daughter, who dared make her smile. Elise noticed him first. Her tiny fingers squeezed the boy's hand, and her giggle faltered. "Papa!" she called, her voice caught between joy and fear. The boy turned. His expression didn't shift. He didn't run. He just looked at Mr. Donovan with a steady calm that made the billionaire pause mid-step. There was something unsettling in that gaze, not defiance, but trust. "I'm sorry, sir," the boy said softly, letting go of Elise's hands. She looked sad. "I thought maybe dancing would help." Donovan blinked. He was ready for excuses, for fear, for a quick escape, but not that. "You thought?" he echoed, his voice harder than he intended. "Who are you? How did you get in here?" "I didn't mean to come inside," the boy replied, his feet shifting on the cold stone of the garden path. "The gates were open. I sleep in the alley behind them sometimes. I heard music, and I saw her." Elise interrupted, her voice trembling now. "He didn't hurt me, Papa. He was nice. He made me fly." Donovan's throat clenched. She hadn't used that word in years. Fly. It was what she used to say when he spun her in the air before the accident. Before everything fell apart. "What's your name?" Donovan asked, his voice quieter. "Leo," the boy answered, straightening his back. "I'm 8, same as her." Donovan studied him. The boy was thin, too thin, but there was light in his eyes and a gentleness in his manner that felt familiar. He looked down at Elise, who now reached for Leo's hand again, protective. "You smiled," Donovan said to her. "You haven't done that in a long time." "She smiled because of me," Leo said softly. "Not because I'm special, just because I didn't treat her like she was broken." Donovan's breath caught. The truth of it hit him like cold wind. He didn't reply. He couldn't. Because suddenly the mask he wore every day, the one made of wealth, grief, and distance, began to crack. That night, Donovan sat in his study again, but the window no longer held his attention. Instead, his fingers traced the edge of an old photograph that had long been buried under paperwork and forgotten memories. In it, Elise was only 5, standing on his shoes, arms around his neck, as he spun her around the ballroom floor. She was laughing then, too. He closed his eyes. The memory played so vividly. Her laughter, her mother's voice calling from the hallway, the smell of jasmine and candle wax, and then, as always, the sudden scream of tires. The phone call, the hospital lights. After the accident, Elise's legs stopped working, but so did something in him. He remembered trying everything, specialists, therapies, experimental treatments, but nothing reached her. She stopped speaking, then stopped smiling. Her eyes had turned into mirrors of grief. And Donovan, he buried himself in business, in silence, in guilt. But that boy today, Leo, he'd done something no money had been able to buy. Donovan shook his head, trying to push away the image, but it clung to him. The barefoot dance, the spinning. Her face lit up like a lantern. It didn't make sense. He thought of Leo's words again. She smiled because I didn't treat her like she was broken. Had he been doing that all along? Had he been protecting her or caging her in his sorrow? He remembered something else then, a faint detail that hadn't mattered before. When Leo said his name, something in his voice, his posture, it had sparked something, a whisper from a long-forgotten place. Donovan rose and opened a drawer. Inside, files and documents sat in perfect order. He pulled one out. Years ago, he had donated to a shelter downtown, one that helped runaway or abandoned children. He hadn't thought much of it, just a name on a donation list. But now, he wondered, was Leo from there? He needed to know more, because this wasn't just about charity, or even about Elise's smile. It was about something he felt in his bones but couldn't yet name, something deeper than coincidence, something like recognition. The next morning came too soon. Donovan hadn't slept. His eyes were heavy, but his mind was racing. Questions he couldn't quiet kept him pacing through the early hours until, finally, he made a call. "Marla," he said as his assistant picked up, "I need you to find everything you can on a boy named Leo, 8 years old, possibly connected to any shelter in the downtown area. Start with St. Andrew's Home for Children." There was a long pause on the other end. "Sir, that's the one your late wife used to volunteer at." Donovan froze. He hadn't thought about that place in years, not since Grace's passing. "I know," he replied. "Just do it, please." He ended the call and turned toward Elise's room. The door was ajar. He knocked softly, but no answer came. When he pushed it open, she wasn't in her bed. Panic prickled his skin. "Elsie," he called, voice rising. He checked the bathroom. Empty. Then the hallway. The kitchen. Still nothing. Then, laughter. He ran toward the sound. Out in the garden again, under the soft glow of morning sun, Elise was with him. Leo. The boy was there again, barefoot on the grass, spinning slowly as Elise waved her arms in rhythm from her chair. Donovan stepped onto the patio, jaw tight. "You're here again," he said. It wasn't a question. Leo nodded. "She said I could come back. I didn't touch anything." "I didn't say you could either," Donovan replied coldly. Elise's smile faded. "She wanted to dance," Leo said, eyes meeting Donovan's again. "And I wanted to help." A rustle came from behind. It was Mrs. Keller, the housekeeper. Her hands were clenched, expression uneasy. "I tried to stop him, sir," she said quickly. "But," Miss Elise insisted. "She said it was important." Donovan turned to her. "You knew he was here?" Mrs. Keller hesitated. "Yes, sir, but he's kind, and he reminds me of someone." "Who?" Donovan asked. She looked at Leo again, her eyes softening. "Your wife, sir. He reminds me of Grace." That hit Donovan like a slap. He stared at Leo, his heart skipping. "Who are you?" he whispered. And Leo, still holding Elise's hand, just smiled sadly. Later that afternoon, Donovan stood alone in the library, clutching something he hadn't touched in years, a small worn velvet box. It had been Grace's. Inside was a charm bracelet she used to wear every day, the tiny gold charms each symbolizing a milestone. Their wedding, Elise's birth, her volunteer work, and one final charm, a tiny silver ballet slipper. She had added it during the first week of teaching dance to the children at St. Andrew's. He remembered how she'd come home glowing, speaking of a boy who followed her around asking to learn the steps. "He doesn't have much," she had said, "but he feels everything. You can see it in how he moves." That night, the bracelet had vanished from her wrist. She told him she gave it to the boy. He needed something to believe in. Donovan stared at the bracelet now. His hand trembled. Downstairs, he heard Elise's laughter again, lighter this time, as if something inside her had opened for good. He walked toward the sound, following it like a trail through the hall. He found them in the music room. Elise was playing softly on the piano, and Leo stood nearby, humming a tune that matched her rhythm perfectly. Donovan stepped inside. Leo noticed but didn't flinch. "Where did you learn that song?" Donovan asked. Leo looked down. "I don't remember. It's always been in my head." "It's not just any song," Donovan said slowly. "My wife composed it. It was Elise's lullaby." Leo's eyes widened. "She used to hum it at the shelter," he said quietly. "The lady with the warm hands. She said it was for someone she missed." Donovan's chest tightened. He crossed the room, knelt beside Leo, and opened the velvet box. "Do you recognize this?" he asked. Leo stared at the bracelet for a long moment. Then, with trembling fingers, he reached into his pocket and pulled out something wrapped in a scrap of cloth. Another charm, a small silver slipper. "It broke one day," he whispered. "I kept it. I didn't know why." Donovan looked at the charm, then at the boy. His eyes, his movement, the way he looked at Elise like she was the whole sky. And then a voice, Elise's, soft and certain. "Papa, is Leo my brother?" Donovan's breath caught. The bracelet clutched tight in his hand as silence filled the room. The question hung in the air like a thunderclap. Elise looked up at her father with wide, searching eyes, her voice still echoing in the vaulted ceiling. "Is Leo my brother?" Leo froze, his hand still hovering near the bracelet charm. His brow furrowed as if the word brother didn't fit any definition he'd ever been allowed to use. Donovan opened his mouth to speak, but no sound came. His thoughts were a storm. Could it be possible? Grace had always been secretive about some parts of her time at the shelter. She used to disappear for hours, sometimes days, claiming she needed space to give back. He never questioned it. He trusted her. But now, images surged forward. Her late nights, her sudden tears, the way she clutched her stomach during certain quiet moments and then brushed it off with a fragile smile. He had been too busy, too focused on his empire. He hadn't noticed what she might have been trying to tell him. Donovan sat down heavily in the chair beside the piano, the velvet box still open in his hand. "I don't know," he said finally, his voice shaking with something unfamiliar. Humility. "I don't know, Elise." Leo stepped back, confused and suddenly anxious. "I didn't mean to cause trouble, sir," he said quickly. "I swear I didn't know. I've always had this charm. I didn't even know it belonged to someone." Elise turned her wheelchair to face him. "You didn't cause trouble," she whispered. "You brought something back. My smile, and maybe something Papa forgot too." Donovan looked at her, blinking through the fog. She was right. He stood and approached Leo slowly. "I need to know the truth," he said softly. "Not just for me, for both of you. Will you let me help you find it?" Leo hesitated, then nodded. "But if I'm not your son," he asked, voice trembling, "will you still let me stay?" Donovan knelt before him. "We'll face that answer together," he said. "But right now, I want to believe there's a reason you showed up when you did." Elise reached out, resting her hand on Leo's. "Maybe it's not about names or blood," she said. "Maybe it's about who shows up when we need them most." And as the rain finally began to fall outside, soft and steady, a new kind of warmth began to bloom inside the mansion. Fragile, uncertain, but unmistakably real. The next day began with a quiet phone call. Donovan had tasked Marla, his assistant, with retrieving every piece of documentation related to Grace's time at St. Andrew's Home for Children. He paced by the front window as she spoke, her voice laced with a tension she couldn't quite mask. "Sir," she said, "there's something I think you need to see for yourself." By midday, Donovan was standing in the shelter's modest records office, a place filled with dusty folders and yellowing papers. Marla handed him a slim file labeled only with a first name, Leo. As he opened it, his hands began to shake. There was a photo, an old one, taken when Leo was a baby, wrapped in a blue blanket with a faint floral pattern Donovan recognized immediately. It had once belonged to Grace. He scanned the intake form. No last name. Mother listed only as Grace. Under notes, brought in by a woman who insisted on anonymity. Left a note. He deserves a life without shadows. Donovan stared at the page. His heart cracked open. Grace had a son. She had never told him. Why? A rustle in the doorway pulled him from the page. It was Sister Camille, the elderly nun who still ran the shelter. Her face was lined with the wisdom of decades, her eyes soft but sharp. "She loved that boy deeply," she said gently. "But she said the timing wasn't right. Your world. It was complicated." Donovan turned to her, voice low. "Why didn't she tell me?" "She planned to," Sister Camille said. "But then Elise was born. And soon after the accident, your life fell apart. She was protecting all of you, in her own way." Donovan looked back down at the file. "He's my son," he whispered. "All this time." Sister Camille touched his arm. "And he's still here, which means it's not too late." Back at the mansion, Leo sat beside Elise in the garden. She was showing him how to braid a daisy chain, her small fingers nimble with practice. "I never had a real family," he said. "Not one that stayed." "You do now," Elise said simply. Leo looked up. "What if your dad doesn't want me?" She smiled at him. "Then I'll teach him how." Inside, Donovan clutched the photograph to his chest and closed his eyes. He wasn't ready, but he would be. Because now, the truth was no longer a shadow. That evening, Donovan stood outside Elise's room, hand hovering near the doorknob. On the other side, he could hear their voices. Elise's light and clear, Leo's more cautious, but warm. They were playing some kind of game, and Elise laughed, that same musical laugh he had thought lost forever. He knocked gently. "Come in," Elise chirped. He stepped inside, the file folder clutched in his hand. Leo sat cross-legged on the floor, helping Elise line up a row of stuffed animals for what appeared to be an elaborate tea party. He looked up when Donovan entered but didn't speak. Donovan sat down across from them, folding his legs slowly, uncertainly, like a man stepping into a world not built for him. He placed the folder on the floor. "I went to the shelter today," he said softly. "St. Andrew's." Leo tensed. Elise stopped moving. Donovan opened the folder and slid the photograph toward Leo. "Do you recognize this?" Leo looked at it. Slowly, he nodded. "I've had dreams about that blanket," he murmured. "I didn't know it was real." "It was your mother's," Donovan said, his voice cracking. "Grace. She brought you there when you were just a baby." Elise gasped. "So it's true?" Donovan nodded. "She left a note. Said you deserved a life without shadows. I think she was trying to protect us all." Leo stared at the photo. His hands shook. "So, she was my mom?" Donovan swallowed. "Yes." Leo blinked quickly, then looked up. "And you?" Donovan hesitated. Then, voice firm despite the quiver beneath it, I believe I'm your father, Leo. I didn't know, but I know now. Elise reached over, grasping Leo's hand. Her eyes were wide with wonder. Then you're my brother, she whispered. Leo's lips trembled. He looked at Donovan. Do you want me to be? Donovan didn't answer with words. He opened his arms slowly, heart pounding. And Leo, barefoot, brave, broken in the most beautiful way, stepped forward. When they embraced, something deep in the walls of the house seemed to shift. The mansion, for so long filled with silence and sorrow, finally exhaled. Elise smiled through tears, and for the first time in years Donovan let himself cry, not from grief, but from something new, something he'd almost forgotten how to feel: hope. The following morning was different. Not in the way the sunlight filtered through the curtains or the scent of fresh croissants in the air, but in the atmosphere, softer, warmer. The mansion, once stiff with grief, now felt like it had exhaled something old and bitter. Leo sat at the breakfast table beside Elise, his eyes wide as he eyed the spread before him. Fruit, warm pastries, eggs, and more than he'd likely ever seen on a single table. He didn't touch anything. Donovan entered, wearing something Elise had never seen on him before. Jeans. Not tailored slacks, not designer suits. Just simple jeans and a sweater that made him look like someone human. Good morning, he said quietly. Leo looked down. I can eat after you, sir. Donovan paused. You don't wait in this house, Leo. Not anymore. Leo blinked, then slowly reached for a slice of bread. Elise beamed beside him, but the moment was short-lived. Mrs. Keller entered the dining room, her face unusually tight. She approached Donovan with a whisper. There's someone at the gate, sir, from Child Protective Services. The words dropped like stones. Donovan stood immediately. What do they want? She said she got an anonymous call about a homeless boy trespassing and being possibly manipulated by a wealthy family. Leo's fork clattered onto his plate. His hands began to tremble. I didn't mean to cause trouble, he said quickly, standing up. I can go. I'm used to leaving. Elise rolled her chair to him. No. Donovan turned to Leo, jaw set. You're not going anywhere. Not again. Within minutes, a stern-faced woman in a gray suit stood in the front hall, holding a clipboard. Her eyes flicked over Leo, then Donovan, then Elise. I'm here for a wellness check, she said. We received a report that this boy has been staying here under questionable circumstances. Donovan stepped forward, calm but unwavering. He's my son. She raised an eyebrow. Is there documentation to support that? I'm working on it, he replied. But in the meantime, he stays. You'll have to go through me. She narrowed her eyes. That might be exactly what I have to do, Mr. Donovan. And with that, she handed him a folded notice. Until paternity is confirmed and proper guardianship is filed, the boy is to be removed from the premises by tomorrow morning. Leo's breath hitched. Elise let out a tiny sob. And Donovan? He stood frozen, fury and helplessness rising in his throat. It wasn't over. Not yet. That night, the mansion felt like it had gone back in time, back to when silence reigned and laughter was a distant memory. Elise didn't speak during dinner. Leo pushed food around his plate without taking a bite. Donovan sat at the head of the table, the CPS notice unfolded before him like a cruel riddle he couldn't solve. He had called his lawyer. They were already rushing to file emergency guardianship, but the woman from CPS had made it clear. Without proof, Leo would be taken. I won't let them take him, Elise said suddenly, her voice small but defiant. He just got here. Donovan looked at her, eyes tired. I know, and I'm doing everything I can. That night, he walked to his late wife's studio, the room she used to paint and store the things that mattered most to her. It had remained untouched since her death, too sacred to disturb. He opened the door slowly. Dust shimmered in the moonlight. Canvases leaned against the walls. Brushes still lay scattered on the table. And in the corner, beneath an old sheet, was a trunk. He knelt, pulled off the cover, and opened it. Inside, among the journals and photographs, was a small envelope, yellowed with age. On it, in Grace's handwriting, "In case the truth is ever needed." His hands shook as he opened it. Inside were two things, a letter and a birth certificate. The letter was addressed to "My love, if I'm gone." Donovan read it in silence. Grace's words were tender, apologetic, full of sorrow and fierce love. She admitted everything, how she had been pregnant before Elise, how she had been afraid, how she had trusted St. Andrew's to keep Leo safe until she could tell him, but never found the right time. The certificate listed Donovan as the father. Tears slid silently down his cheeks. Down the hall, Elise and Leo were curled together on her bed, whispering in the dark. "What if I go and never come back?" Leo asked. "You will come back," Elise replied, "because my papa never breaks a promise." At that very moment, Donovan stood in the studio's doorway. He clutched the documents to his chest, his eyes fixed on the two children. He now had the proof, but more than that, he had a purpose. And tomorrow, when CPS returned, they wouldn't just find a boy without a home. They'd find a father ready to fight. The morning sunlight crept slowly across the Donovan estate, touching every polished surface with a golden calm that felt like a lie. In the foyer, Donovan stood tall, dressed not in his usual tailored armor but in something softer, still sharp, still commanding, but with eyes that now held fire instead of fog. Beside him, Leo shifted nervously. His tiny hands gripped Elise's wheelchair handle as if grounding himself. Elise in turn reached up and squeezed his wrist. "Whatever happens," she whispered, "we stay together." Donovan glanced down at them. "No one's taking you away, Leo. Not today, not ever." At precisely 8 a.m., the doorbell rang. The same gray-suited woman from CPS entered with two other agents, a clipboard in her hand and formality etched into every motion. Her eyes scanned the scene, Donovan, Leo, Elise, and narrowed slightly, as if expecting theatrics. "I'm here to carry out the temporary removal order," she said. "Unless, of course, there has been a legal change in circumstances." Donovan stepped forward and handed her the envelope. "There has." She opened it slowly, brows furrowing as she read the documents inside. Her eyes flicked up. This is a birth certificate. With my name on it," Donovan said, "and a notarized letter from the child's biological mother, my late wife." He then handed over a second document, signed paperwork from his attorney, officially petitioning for full custody and expedited confirmation of paternity. She blinked. For the first time, her voice lost its edge. "This is highly unusual, but legitimate." Donovan's tone sharpened. "So you understand now why he's not going anywhere." One of the agents behind her leaned in and whispered something. She hesitated, then looked at Leo. "Would you be willing to speak with me alone for a moment, Leo?" Leo looked up at Donovan, unsure. "You don't have to," Donovan said firmly. "Not without me." But Leo surprised them both. "It's okay," he said. "I want to." In the study, Leo sat across from the woman. "Do you feel safe here?" she asked. Leo nodded. "More than I ever have." "Why?" He paused, then looked out the window where Elise was waiting. "Because he came back for me, and he didn't have to. That's how I know." Back in the foyer, Donovan waited. Elise held his hand. The silence stretched. Then the door opened. The woman emerged, clipboard lowered. "We won't be removing him," she said. "Effective immediately, he stays. The court will take it from here. But for now, he's home." Donovan exhaled slowly. Elise squealed. "And Leo?" He didn't say a word. He just ran forward, straight into Donovan's arms. The days that followed unfolded like a dream none of them dared to hope for. The mansion, once echoing with absence, now pulsed with life. Leo had a room, his own room, painted in soft blue, with shelves filling up quickly with books and hand-me-down toys that Elise insisted he borrow forever. Every morning, Donovan sat with both children at the breakfast table. He no longer read the newspaper in silence. Instead, he listened, really listened, to their stories, their dreams, They're quiet, strange jokes that only siblings understand. But healing wasn't simple. One afternoon, Donovan found Leo in the garage, curled beside a stack of boxes. The boy flinched when Donovan entered. "I didn't break anything," he said quickly. It was too quiet upstairs." Donovan knelt beside him. "You're not in trouble, Leo." Leo stared down at the floor. "It still doesn't feel real, that I'm allowed to be here, that I get to stay." Donovan placed a hand on his shoulder. "I understand, but this is real, and you're not just staying. You're belonging." Leo's lips trembled. "Do you think my mom, would be proud of me?" Donovan's throat tightened. He had wondered the same about himself 1,000 times since Grace died. "Yes," he said quietly, "because you found your way back to us, and because you never stopped dancing, even when the world tried to keep you still." Leo nodded slowly, his chin wobbling, but he didn't cry. He simply leaned into Donovan's side, resting his head against him. Meanwhile, Elise had begun asking questions too. "Why didn't Mama tell us?" she asked one night while Donovan tucked her in. He smoothed her blanket with gentle hands. "She was afraid, I think. She didn't know how to explain everything. But it doesn't mean she didn't love us. Or him." Elise nodded. "Leo said she used to hum to him, the same lullaby she sang to me." Donovan smiled, his heart aching. "Because you were always connected, even when you didn't know it." Later, as the house fell into sleep, Donovan walked the halls alone. He passed Grace's studio and paused by the door. The light from the hallway cast a soft glow inside. He didn't enter, not yet, but he whispered, just under his breath, "I did what you couldn't. I hope that's enough." And in the silence, it felt like she answered, not with words, but with peace. Weeks passed. The air in the Donovan estate no longer felt like it was holding its breath. Laughter echoed down the hallways. The dining room, once a chamber of routine and ritual, had become a place of storytelling, playful arguments, and endless spilled juice boxes. But outside the gates, a quiet storm was building. One morning, Marla approached Donovan in his study with a stack of papers in hand. Her expression was tense. "We've received a letter," she said, "from a man claiming to be Leo's biological uncle. He's requesting visitation and possibly custody." Donovan stiffened. "Is this legitimate?" "It appears to be." "His name is Martin Holloway, Grace's half-brother." Donovan's eyes narrowed. He hadn't heard that name in nearly 15 years. Grace rarely spoke of him. Just a bitter memory once or twice, mentioned and dismissed. She said he struggled with addiction, Donovan murmured, that he wasn't safe. Marla nodded. "But he's claiming he's clean now, living upstate. Says he has a right to his sister's boy." Donovan's jaw tightened. "No, not after everything Leo's been through. Not after what we've built." But legal rights were complicated. That night he gathered Leo and Elise in the living room and gently explained the situation. Leo didn't speak. He just stared at the fireplace, fingers twisting the charm bracelet now looped loosely around his wrist. "Do I have to meet him?" he asked quietly. "No," Donovan said. "Not if you don't want to, but the court may ask you to talk to someone, a counselor." Elise moved closer to Leo, her small hand on his. "We can talk to them together." Leo looked up at Donovan. "He didn't want me before. Why now?" Donovan answered honestly. "Sometimes people try to fix things too late, or they want something back they never really appreciated." Leo's voice cracked. "I don't want to go." "You won't," Donovan said, "not without a fight." But inside, a seed of fear had been planted. That night, Donovan sat on the edge of his bed, staring at a single photograph of Grace holding baby Elise. He whispered into the quiet, "Help me protect him. Help me protect them." And across the house, in the dim light of Elise's room, Leo stood awake at the window, watching the stars. "Please," he whispered to no one, "don't let them take me again." The court hearing was scheduled quickly, too quickly for Donovan's comfort. By the end of the week, he found himself sitting in a modest family courtroom, the polished wood and faded portraits of judges long past doing little to calm the storm inside him. Leo sat beside him, dressed in a blazer too big for his thin frame. Elise and Marla waited in the hallway outside. Donovan had insisted she not witness the proceeding unless absolutely necessary. Across the aisle sat Martin Holloway. He looked worn, clean-shaven, yes, but with eyes that carried years of bad choices. His suit didn't fit. His hands trembled slightly as he clutched a folder full of documents he barely seemed to understand. When the judge called the session to order, everyone stood. Donovan's lawyer spoke first, presenting the birth certificate, Grace's letter, and Leo's statement. Then Martin took the stand. "I didn't even know my sister had a son until recently," he admitted. "She never told me. But when I found out, I felt like I had to make it right. He's family." "Why now?" the judge asked. Martin swallowed. "I've been clean 2 years. I've got a job, a place. I don't have much, but I can give him a stable home." The judge raised an eyebrow. "More stable than a father who has provided for him, connected with him, and has the documented wishes of the child's mother?" Martin hesitated. "No, but blood should count for something." When Leo took the stand, his feet barely touched the floor. His voice was soft but steady. "He's not a bad man," he said, glancing at Martin. "But he's not my man. Mr. Donovan, he's been here. He sees me. He knows me." "And what about your mother?" the judge asked. Leo touched the charm bracelet. "She loved us both. I think she wanted me here. That's why she left the bracelet. That's why I remembered the song." Donovan watched the judge scribble a note. Every muscle in his body tensed. At the end of the session, the judge called a recess to deliberate. Outside, Donovan sat beside Leo on a bench in the corridor. "You were brave in there," he said. "Whatever happens, I'm proud of you." Leo looked up. "What if they say I have to go?" Donovan leaned closer. "Then I'll fight, again and again, until someone understands what we already know." Leo nodded, but the fear still clung to him. And down the hallway, Martin Holloway watched them quietly, his expression unreadable. Because sometimes, even guilt starts to recognize love when it sees it. When court resumed that afternoon, the air was heavier. The judge's face remained impassive as he shuffled through the papers in front of him. Donovan sat motionless, his hand resting protectively on Leo's shoulder. Across the room, Martin Holloway fidgeted in his seat, a storm of emotions dancing behind his tired eyes. The judge cleared his throat. "This case is delicate. On one side, we have biological ties. On the other, we have evidence of current, active, and deeply rooted care. The law respects both." Donovan braced himself. "But ultimately," the judge continued, "the court's duty is to act in the best interest of the child." He turned to Leo. "Young man, you've made your feelings very clear. You've shown insight, maturity, and courage beyond your years." Then he turned to Donovan. "Mr. Donovan, it is this court's ruling that you retain full legal guardianship of Leo Holloway Donovan, effective immediately." Leo's breath hitched. He looked up at Donovan with disbelief, then toward Martin. "And Mr. Holloway," the judge said, "the court encourages you to seek a relationship with Leo, if and only if he desires it, but custody is no longer in question." The gavel struck, case closed. Outside the courtroom, Leo stood frozen. Elise burst into the hall from where she had been waiting with Marla, eyes wide, unsure. "Well?" she asked, voice trembling. Leo turned to her. "I get to stay." She screamed with joy, rolling forward and wrapping her arms around his waist. Donovan stood back, watching the scene with damp eyes. Martin approached slowly. "Leo," he said, I'm sorry." Leo looked at him, quiet. "Why now?" Martin sighed. "Because losing your sister made me realize what family means. But I was late, and you deserve better than late." Leo nodded slowly. "I hope you stay clean. Maybe one day we can talk." Martin's eyes filled. He nodded and walked away, leaving behind something that almost looked like peace. Later that night, as the sky bloomed with stars, Donovan stood at the edge of the garden while Leo and Elise danced again, this time with music softly playing from the speakers. Elise giggled as Leo spun around her, this time not as a visitor, not as a boy on borrowed time, but as a brother, a son. Donovan smiled, his chest aching in the most beautiful way. And inside the pocket of his coat, he kept Grace's letter, folded, worn, but now no longer a secret, just a promise fulfilled. Autumn arrived gently at the Donovan estate, brushing gold into the trees and sending crisp winds through the gardens where once only silence lived. Inside the home, life had begun to carve out a rhythm, messy, beautiful, and unmistakably real. But with healing came questions. Donovan stood one afternoon at the kitchen island, flipping through old photo albums Grace had kept hidden in a drawer he had never thought to open. Leo sat nearby, working on a school project Elise had insisted they do together. "Did she ever write about me?" Leo asked suddenly. Donovan looked up. "Your mother?" Leo nodded. "I mean, in her journals, in her notes, anywhere. Did she ever wonder about me?" Donovan set the album down gently. His gaze met Leo's, full of the kind of weight only a father could recognize. "Yes," he said. "She wondered, every day." He reached into the drawer again and pulled out a weathered leather-bound notebook. "She started writing this the year before Elise was born. Some entries are about the shelter. Some are about me. But more than half are about you." He slid the book toward Leo. Leo hesitated. His fingers brushed the cover like it might dissolve in his hands. Slowly, he opened to a random page. Her handwriting was delicate and curved, full of unfinished thoughts and aching truths. He smiled today, his first real one. "I didn't know a baby's eyes could look so old." I sang to him, and he stopped crying. "I don't know what kind of life he'll have, but I pray it's one filled with people who listen when he laughs." Leo's breath caught. Another entry. "Sometimes I imagine bringing him home. But what if it breaks everything else? What if Donovan can't forgive me? I already feel like I've lost parts of myself just trying to protect the whole." Donovan stood behind him now, hand on Leo's shoulder. "She was scared, son, not of you, but of what the truth might cost. That doesn't mean she loved you any less." Leo nodded, blinking fast. It feels like a story I wasn't supposed to be in." Donovan crouched beside him. "But you are in it. And now, you help write the rest." From across the room, Elise called, "Leo, I need your help. You promised you'd be my scientist." Leo smiled faintly and closed the journal. "I guess I've got a new story to finish." Donovan watched him go, heart full, not with regret, but with redemption. Weeks turned into months, and autumn deepened into the kind of chill that made fireplaces glow a little brighter and soup taste a little warmer. The Donovan household, once echoing with isolation, now thrummed with the steady heartbeat of family. One Friday evening, Elise convinced them all to have a family movie night, something she declared would become tradition. Blankets were stacked in the living room, popcorn spilled over bowls. Donovan, awkward at first, eventually found himself wedged between both children, a pillow under one arm, and Leo resting his head on his other shoulder. But even in comfort, unease had a way of knocking. After Elise had fallen asleep mid-film, Leo whispered, "Can I ask you something?" Donovan muted the television. "Of course." Leo hesitated. "Why did you never go looking for me?" The question cut deeper than any accusation. Donovan sat up slowly, his fingers laced tightly. "I wish I could say I didn't know," he said softly. "But the truth is, I suspected. Somewhere deep down, I think I always did." Leo turned to face him, expression unreadable. "I saw things I didn't want to see," Donovan continued. "The nights Grace cried alone, her guilt, her silences. But I told myself it wasn't my place. I thought, if she didn't want to tell me, I must not be ready to hear it." Leo looked away. So you just went on without me? Donovan's voice cracked. No, son. I survived without you, but I never really lived. Leo sat in silence. The only sound was the faint ticking of the grandfather clock and Elise's soft breathing. Finally, Leo asked, "Would you have loved me if you had known?" Donovan leaned in. "I would have fought for you, just like I'm fighting now." Leo didn't cry. He didn't speak. He just nodded, slowly. Later that night, Donovan sat alone in his study, the journal still open beside him. One page stood out, Grace's words scrawled in haste, as if written through tears. "If he ever finds this, I pray he forgives me, not for keeping secrets, but for stealing time." Donovan closed the book gently, hand resting on the cover like a silent vow. Time had been stolen, but now every second mattered more than ever. Winter arrived with a quiet hush, dusting the Donovan estate in frost and turning the garden paths into silver threads under moonlight. Inside, the warmth of family defied the cold beyond the walls. One evening, while Elise worked on her winter-themed art project, Leo wandered into Grace's old studio, a room he had yet to explore fully. The door creaked softly as he entered, revealing a space both frozen in time and humming with unspoken stories. Paintings leaned against every wall, portraits, landscapes, abstracts filled with emotion. Leo moved slowly, his fingers grazing canvas edges as if touching memories he never got to live. Then he saw it, a painting unlike the others, hung at eye level, partially hidden behind a stack of sketchbooks. It was unfinished, but unmistakable. A woman seated on a park bench, cradling a baby wrapped in a blue blanket with a floral pattern. His breath caught. The woman's face wasn't fully detailed, but her hands were. The same hands from his dreams. The ones he remembered holding him in the dark. Donovan found him there an hour later, still staring. "She started that painting the year before Elise was born," Donovan said softly. "She told me it was for someone who might come back someday." Leo didn't turn. "She knew I'd find it." "Yes," Donovan replied. "She left breadcrumbs everywhere." Leo looked at him, eyes clouded with something heavier than sadness. "What if I never feel like I belong here? What if I always feel like a reminder?" Donovan stepped closer. "You are a reminder," he said gently, "of her courage, of the love she carried, of what I nearly lost because I was too afraid to ask questions that mattered." Leo's voice wavered. "I don't want to be a wound." "You're not," Donovan said, placing a hand on his shoulder. "You're the healing." They stood together in the quiet, the winter wind tapping faintly against the windows. "I want to finish it," Leo whispered. "The painting." Donovan nodded. "Then we'll do it, together." Back in the living room, Elise rolled up to meet them, glitter on her face and glue on her fingers. "Where'd you two disappear to?" Leo smiled faintly. "Finding ghosts." Elise grinned. "Tell them they're late for hot cocoa." And just like that, the heaviness of the moment softened. But upstairs, the painting waited, unfinished no longer. Over the following weeks, the studio transformed. Donovan cleared the space, brought in new supplies, and watched as Leo, hesitant at first, began to paint with a quiet determination. He didn't try to replicate Grace's style. He honored it. Every afternoon after school, Leo returned to the room, adding brush strokes to the woman's face, softening the baby's outline, blending the sky with delicate blues and rose-tinged clouds. And slowly, the void in the painting filled not only with color but with memory, some inherited, some imagined. Donovan joined him often, sitting nearby with coffee in hand, listening to the quiet scrape of brush on canvas. "She would have loved this," he said one evening, as Leo added the curve of a smile to the mother's face. "I hope so," Leo murmured. "It feels like I'm talking to her." But not everyone understood. During a parent meeting at Leo's new school, one of the other fathers approached Donovan cautiously. He was polite but clearly curious. "I heard your son came from a shelter." Donovan met his gaze. "Yes, my son did." The man hesitated. Must have been quite the adjustment for a family like yours. Donovan's jaw tensed. For any family, yes, but it's not about adjustment, it's about recognition. The man blinked. Recognition? Of who he already was, Donovan said, and who I failed to see. That evening, Donovan shared the story with Leo at dinner. People will always have opinions, he said gently, but they don't get to decide your worth. Leo stirred his pasta. Sometimes it still feels like I'm pretending, like someone's going to tap me on the shoulder and say I don't belong here. Elise reached across the table and booped his nose with a spoon. Then I'll boop them into next Tuesday. Leo laughed. Donovan smiled. Later that night, Donovan walked into the studio and paused before the nearly finished painting. He studied it, then reached for a small, unused brush and dipped it in gold. With careful hands, he added a final stroke to the sky. Just above the baby's head, a single word, hidden in light. Home. And as the paint dried, so did the doubt. Because some truths don't need to be shouted, they only need to be seen. Christmas arrived with gentle snow and the kind of warmth that can't be bought or wrapped. The Donovan estate, once quiet and cavernous, now brimmed with signs of life. Mismatched ornaments on the tree, holiday music echoing from room to room, and a hand-drawn family Christmas rules chart tacked crookedly to the refrigerator. Rule number 1, hot cocoa before 9 a.m. is allowed. Rule number 2, everyone must dance when Jingle Bell Rock plays. Rule number 3, no one is allowed to be alone during presents. Leo had made that last one himself. On Christmas morning, they gathered by the tree in their pajamas, Donovan included, though his were still more cashmere than cotton. Elise tore through ribbons with glee, squealing as she discovered an art kit that nearly rivaled the one in Grace's studio. Leo opened his gifts more slowly. A new coat, books, a hand-carved music box that played the lullaby Grace had once sung. But there was one gift left. A small square box wrapped in silver paper with a card that read only, "To Leo, from Mom." He looked up at Donovan, confused. "I found it last week," Donovan explained. "In her hope chest. I didn't even know she had prepared it." Leo's hands trembled as he opened it. Inside was a leather bracelet, simple and worn, with 3 initials etched in its clasp, GHD Grace Holloway Donovan. Tucked beneath it was a note, written in her graceful hand. "For when you're old enough to understand that you were never forgotten. I loved you before you took your first breath, and I will love you long after your last. This world will try to tell you who you are. Listen instead to the people who see you." Leo didn't speak. He clutched the bracelet, head bowed, tears silently spilling down his cheeks. Donovan knelt beside him and pulled him close. Elise wrapped her arms around them both. No words were needed. Later, as the sun set and lights twinkled through frost-kissed windows, Donovan hung one last ornament on the tree, a silver slipper. It wasn't just Grace's memory anymore. It was her legacy. And in the reflection of the glass, you could see what once seemed impossible. A father, a daughter, a son, and a family, rebuilt not by chance, but by love. Spring tiptoed into the Donovan estate like a quiet apology, melting snow from the garden paths and coaxing blossoms from the cold, bare branches. The air smelled different now, of possibility, of something returned. The morning sun poured through the kitchen windows, and Leo sat at the table, hunched over a letter. Not just any letter, a school assignment. Write about the person who changed your life. He had started 3 times already, once with Elise, once with Donovan, and once, briefly, with Grace. But none of the versions had felt right, because the truth didn't belong to just one name. Down the hall, Donovan was on the phone with the family lawyer. Legal paperwork had been finalized last week. Leo was now, officially and irrevocably, Leo Holloway Donovan, by name, by law, and by love. But none of that mattered as much as what was happening now. Donovan walked into the kitchen and saw Leo struggling, pencil tapping the table in frustration. "Need help?" he asked. Leo glanced up, eyes tired. It's hard. I don't want to pick just one person. It feels wrong. Donovan smiled. Then don't. Tell the truth. Write about all of it. Leo frowned. You can do that? Donovan chuckled. The best stories always do. Later that day, Leo sat in the garden, notebook open in his lap, and began to write. There wasn't one person who changed my life. There were three. One taught me how to laugh again, even when I was scared. One showed me what it means to be chosen, not just born into love. And one gave me a name before I even knew who I was. Elise taught me how to fly, even without legs that work. Mr. Donovan, Dad, taught me that forgiveness is sometimes the bravest thing a person can give. And my mom, she gave me a story worth finishing. Some people wait their whole lives to be found. I didn't know I was waiting, but I'm glad they found me anyway. He looked up from the page, sunlight on his face, wind tousling his hair, and for the first time, the words felt like they were finally his. Back inside the house, Donovan opened a drawer and placed Grace's journal next to Leo's new school portrait. Two halves of the same story, complete at last. A few weeks later, the Donovan family stood outside St. Andrew's Home for Children, the old brick building casting long shadows in the afternoon light. It was Leo's idea to come back, not to visit the past, but to honor it. He held Elise's hand as they walked through the familiar gates, her wheelchair bumping gently over the uneven pavement. Donovan followed behind, his pace slower, eyes scanning every corner with a reverence he hadn't felt before. Inside, Sister Camille welcomed them with open arms. My, how you've grown, she said to Leo, hugging him tightly. And you brought your family. Leo smiled. I wanted to show them where I started. And thank you. Sister Camille's eyes twinkled. The thanks isn't mine, child. It belongs to the journey that brought you home. They walked the halls, passing rooms filled with children's laughter and quiet corners of faded wallpaper. Elise asked 100 questions, and Leo answered each one with the precision of memory. Where he used to sleep, where he used to hide, where Grace once sang him lullabies in secret. In the main corridor, a faded mural stretched across the wall, bright colors dulled by time. Grace had painted it years ago with the children, trees, stars, and a pair of open hands holding a small house. Leo stood in front of it, staring. I remember watching her paint that, he whispered. I didn't know she was my mom, but I remember thinking, she painted like she missed someone. Donovan stepped beside him. She was missing you. Leo reached into his coat and pulled out a small envelope. Can I leave something? Sister Camille nodded. He walked to the base of the mural and tucked the envelope behind a loose brick. Inside it was his letter, the one he wrote for school. I want the next kid who feels forgotten to find this, he said, so they know they're not. Sister Camille wiped a tear from her cheek. Back in the car, Elise clutched Leo's hand tightly. You're brave, she said. Leo shook his head. No, I'm just finally me. Donovan started the engine, glancing at them through the rear-view mirror. Home? Leo smiled. Yeah, let's go home. And as they pulled away, the sun lit up the mural one more time, hands wide open, waiting. That summer, the Donovan estate was louder than ever. The sound of running water from the new garden fountain mixed with Leo and Elise's laughter, their voices dancing across the grounds like they had always belonged there. Elise had taken up photography. She wheeled herself around with a small camera strapped to her lap, documenting everything from Leo's awkward tree-climbing attempts to Donovan burning breakfast on a rare lazy Sunday. Leo, meanwhile, had started sketching. The unfinished painting in Grace's studio had inspired him beyond its brush strokes. He filled notebook after notebook with moments he didn't want to forget. Snapshots not of faces, but of feelings. One afternoon, while Elise was organizing her photo prints and Leo shaded a sketch of Donovan reading under a tree, Elise looked up suddenly. Do you think Mom knows? She asked. Leo paused, his pencil hovering midline. Knows what? That we're okay now. That we're together. Leo thought for a moment. I think, yeah. She left too many signs not to. Elise tilted her head. Like what? Leo tapped the bracelet on his wrist. This. The music box. The painting. And that charm you wear now. Elise touched the little slipper around her neck. She left pieces of herself so we could find each other. Leo smiled faintly. That's what love does, right? It leaves light behind. Donovan stepped out from the kitchen, a tray of lemonade in his hands and an expression that said he'd been listening longer than they thought. You know, he said gently, I used to think love was something you gave once, to one person. And when they were gone, it just ended. He handed them each a glass. But I was wrong, he continued. Love doesn't vanish. It changes shape. It finds new places to live. Elise looked at him. Where does yours live now? Donovan looked at them both. In you. Later that night, the three of them sat around the fire pit. No stories, no heavy memories, just the sound of crackling wood and stars breathing overhead. Leo lay on the grass, hands behind his head. Elise dozed in her chair. And Donovan, once a man made of silence and regret, now sat with a peace so quiet and profound, it didn't need to be spoken. Because some endings are soft, and some beginnings come disguised as second chances. As the summer waned, something new began to bloom, not in the garden, but in Leo himself. His school had announced a county-wide art competition themed Where I Belong. At first, Leo shrugged it off, but Donovan encouraged him gently. Maybe it's not about winning, he said one morning, sliding a new set of paints across the table. Maybe it's about telling your story in your own way. Leo didn't answer right away, but that night he set up in Grace's studio. For 3 weeks he painted. He skipped video games. He even turned down Elise's movie marathons. No one was allowed to see it, not even Donovan. When the submission was due, Leo carried the canvas to the car himself. His hands trembled, but his eyes were sure. The night before the results were announced, Donovan sat beside Leo on the back patio, watching the wind bend the trees. Why that theme? Leo asked suddenly. Donovan looked up. What do you mean? Where I belong. Who decides that? Is it where you're born, where you sleep? Donovan thought carefully. It's where your truth feels safe. Leo nodded slowly. Then I guess I painted the right thing. The next day, they attended the exhibition at the town hall. Paintings lined the gallery walls, cities, sunsets, families, forests. Leo stood silently in front of his own. His painting was not a portrait, not a landscape. It was a room. Soft golden light spilling through a window, a wheelchair tucked beside an easel, a charm bracelet resting on a piano, and 3 silhouettes, blurred but unmistakable. A girl with a camera, a man in a sweater, and a boy in bare feet standing at the center, holding a brush. No faces, just presence, just belonging. When the judges called his name as the winner, Leo didn't react at first. Then Elise shrieked and rolled toward him, nearly knocking him over with joy. Donovan clapped slowly, his smile quiet and proud. But what mattered most wasn't the ribbon. It was the note pinned beside the painting, written in Leo's careful handwriting. Home isn't a place you find. It's the place that finds you when you stop hiding. And beneath it, dedicated to Grace Holloway Donovan, I made it home, Mom. People stopped to read. Some wiped their eyes. And Leo stood there, no longer the boy who danced alone in the garden, but the boy who stayed. The evening after the exhibition was quiet, not the heavy kind that used to haunt the mansion, but the soft, earned kind, the kind that follows something complete. Leo sat on the balcony, legs dangling over the edge, the award ribbon tucked in his sketchbook. He looked out over the garden, where the last golden streaks of daylight shimmered through the trees. Donovan joined him, carrying 2 mugs of hot cocoa. No words, just presence. Do you think she saw it? Leo asked eventually. Donovan didn't hesitate. Yes, I think she saw all of it. Leo nodded, then pulled something from his pocket. A folded note, worn at the edges. I wrote her back, he said quietly. After all the letters, after everything. Donovan raised an eyebrow. Want to read it? Leo unfolded the paper and read aloud. Dear Mom, I used to wonder why you left me behind. I used to think it meant I didn't matter, but now I understand. You didn't leave me. You led me. You led me to Elise, who sees me with her heart. You led me to Dad, who fought for me when I couldn't fight for myself. And you led me to the kind of love that doesn't end, it just changes form. I forgive you, and I love you. Always. Leo Donovan didn't speak for a long time. He just placed a hand on Leo's shoulder and squeezed, the silence between them thick with emotion. Inside, Elise had fallen asleep on the couch, curled around a blanket Leo had picked out for her. The house glowed from within, warm lights, soft shadows, the kind of peace that only comes after the storm. Donovan looked out over the estate. Once a fortress of grief, now transformed into something else entirely. A home. He turned to Leo. What do you want to do tomorrow? Leo smiled. Anything, as long as we do it together. Donovan nodded. Then that's what we'll do, from now on. And as the stars blinked to life above them, the past didn't disappear. It just folded itself gently into the present, quietly, respectfully, like a guest who had finally made peace with the family it left behind. This was not the end, but it was the beginning of something whole,